just before we get started, everybody, Ngaire is going to take us through this presentation, and if you can all just pop yourselves on mute, which it looks like you have, and if you've got any questions that you think about while she's presenting, then throw it in the chat. We'll keep an eye on it, and if there's anything that sort of really jumps out, we'll stop Ngaire and ask those questions. So yeah, hi Ngaire.
Awesome, thanks very much, Michelle. So as mentioned, I'm Ngaire and I'm a financial coach at Ngaire. So today I'm going to talk to you about financial resilience and growing wealth. So I'll talk for about 20 to 25 minutes, and I'm probably going to talk at pace because there's quite a bit to cover off. But first of all, we've got a little bit of admin to sort. So this is informational only. So financial advice needs to be specific to you, who you are, what you're trying to achieve, and the timeframes you've got. And but it starts with some generic concepts, and which is what we want to cover off today. So as Michelle mentioned, I'm going to cover off sort of what is financial resilience, the pillars of financial success, what's your financial BMI. Now, these are your tendencies when it comes to money. Nobody wants to be a financial dud or failure, yet very few of us are on track to be financially successful. So why is that? We'll talk about home loan repayments, and then we'll talk about what are the key takeaways that you need to be carrying forward from here. So as mentioned, if you've got a question, please put it in the chat box. You'll also be invited to have a one-on-one session with us. We're all financial advisors, and we can offer you a discount on your initial session with us today as well. I'll talk more about that at the end. So as mentioned, why do we do what we do? And as Michelle mentioned, 83% of Kiwis are financially stressed. So we tend to think that surely it's only if you're a low income earner. But in reality, at 83%, most of us are financially stressed. So it's relevant at every single life stage or milestone. So whether you've just graduated, you've just left uni, you've got this massive student loan, and now that's kind of your focus to repay. And you can't save much, and you're finding it hard to get on the property ladder, and it seems to be getting further and further away. That creates stress. Or you're on 2 incomes, but you're about to go down to 1 because you're starting a family, and you're really not sure how that's going to look. That creates stress. Or you've got this mortgage that is coming off its fixed interest rate and it's doubling, and you're like, well, how the heck am I going to manage that? It's stressful. Or you've got less than 10 years before you retire and you don't have a retirement plan, and you've got no idea how much you even need for retirement. It's stressful. And that's before we even introduce or talk about your partner, who might have a completely different mindset around money, or your kids, who could be like a financial leech on your finances. So it's kind of easy to see, when we understand a bit more, why 83% of us are stressed, and it's got nothing to do with your level of income. It's got everything to do with progress or a lack of progress. A lack of knowing where you're going creates financial stress. So we also know that 95% of us don't have a plan to ensure we'll have enough for retirement. And most people will run out of money within 10 years of retiring, even with KiwiSaver. We know that most employed New Zealanders will have less than 6 months worth of expenses saved. So if they got hit by a huge financial curveball or an event that they had unplanned, it's kind of enough to make households, like shake households to their foundations. Excuse me. What we know about financial stress is that it does impact your overall general stress levels. That in turn impacts your motivation, your confidence, and your financial confidence, and it certainly impacts your financial courage. When you're stressed, you don't sort of see the lines that you need to, and you're making the wrong decisions based on the wrong information, or probably more accurately, the wrong understanding of that information. With every financial decision, there's a short, medium, and long-term implication, and how you start to layer those on top of each other really impacts whether you jump ahead financially or whether you just kind of float around. When you're not clear on what you need to do and in what order, you make the wrong decisions, and then that impacts your well-being. We know that finances are the leading cause of insomnia in females and the leading cause of relationship breakdown. So it impacts your relationships, it impacts your productivity, and that's what we want to fix and address. So some of the initial components to what makes you financially resilient is having cash on hand for emergencies, having access to 6 months worth of living expenses, having created wealth opportunities, which could be having lots of eggs in different types of baskets. The benefit of being financially resilient is that your financial flank is never exposed, regardless of the headwinds you might face. So for those of us that aren't yet financially resilient, the time to work on that is now, regardless of what's happening around us. So the reason being is that the average age that we're now buying our first home is 36. In our grandparents' or parents' day, this used to be 26. So if you're 36, you've just bought your first home and you're going to repay your mortgage over 30 years, at best, you're going to be mortgage free at 66, and you haven't even had time to save or think about retirement. So today I want to show you some of the components that go into financial success and improve your capability, which will then improve your confidence and ultimately make you financially courageous, because that's where the good times lay. So what makes financial success? If you're financially successful, you're in control with a plan. You're on track to be mortgage free as quickly as possible. And for our clients, this time frame is between 8 and 10 years rather than the 30. And you'll learn today how that will materially change their opportunities and the timing of these opportunities. You'll know what you need for retirement, and you'll be on track to achieve this. You would have created financially independent kids. And if you're self-employed, you're maximizing your profit and you've got an exit strategy once that time's done. So financial success, I guess we can agree on what it means, but what are the pillars? Many people will say, well, you just need to improve your financial literacy. And no doubt you've heard that. But I can tell you that you can improve your literacy as much as possible. But if you don't translate that into behavior or an ability to execute a strategy, it amounts to nothing. So the pillars of financial success are determined by your behavior. Do you have a wealth mindset? Do you have the right financial strategy for your age and stage and your goals and what you have to play with? Do you have the right system in place? And are you maintaining momentum as effortlessly as possible for you? The least amount of friction in any plan, whatever it is, the more likely you are to achieve it. That's just basic psychology. And what we know with money, like what we know with weight loss or anything that we want to achieve in life, is that knowing something doesn't translate into doing, especially if your tendency is not to do a particular thing. And the other thing is, if your time is so insufficient that even if you wanted to do it, you're never going to be able to prioritize it. But the key to financial success is having the right strategy and the ability to execute with changing conditions. But as mentioned before, when it comes to financial success, it's the old 80-20 rule. The best strategy in the world is not going to help you if your behavior isn't there. And at Enable Me, we specialize in designing that strategy for our clients, but most importantly, we coach them to unlock their capability so that they can execute on that strategy. So your financial behavior starts with your tendencies around money. And the mix of these tendencies are unique to you. And we call this a financial BMI. So it starts with your money personality, which is one of the tendencies that impact your BMI. So you're either a shopper or a saver or somewhere in between. And it doesn't matter what you are, because we have the strategy to overcome or lean into it, but we have to understand where you're at first. So a saver is someone who finds it easy to save money. It fills them with joy. And yep, they do exist. A shopper is someone who can save if they need to, but they need a reason. And in the absence of a reason, they find it easier to spend. And plotters, they're somewhere in the middle and they lean in one direction depending on what the weather's doing or what's going on for them at that point. It's important to know that there is no right or wrong, but it obviously impacts the strategy. So a shopper can be useless at saving if they don't have a reason, but they are awesome at growing wealth. Whereas a saver is someone who absolutely has a head start on a shopper, but because their rate of saving is the engine room to progress. But where they tend to fall short is they don't have the courage to design the right investment strategy to kind of put the oomph under that money that they're saving. So their money doesn't work as hard as what they are, and that's what we need to address. Then we need to look at your cash flow position. Are you sinking, floating, or flying? Sinking, you've probably got a lot of short-term debt and you're going backwards on a day-to-day basis. Floating, you're just getting by, living payday to payday and not getting ahead particularly fast. And to be fair, that's where the majority of us sit. And if you're flying, you're saving no less than 20% of your income. Our goal is to move you from sinking to floating to flying. And if you're already flying high, can we get you higher to reach that destination as fast as possible? And if your destination is having enough for retirement and you're already there, then our target and my goal is to give you bigger goals, like can we get you retired earlier? So when clients come to see us, this is a typical example of what we're faced with. So they're probably in a floating position, living within their means, probably living comfortably payday to payday. So they're on track, and let's say they should have their mortgage repaid in 20 years. So in this example, they're 45, they'll pay their mortgage off at 65. They're still contributing to KiwiSaver. So when they hit 65, they'll be mortgage free on their home, and they'll get a little boost from their KiwiSaver, which they'll use to fund their retirement for a couple of years. But then we have a gap. Because on average, we need to fund you to around age 90. So that's 25 years of living costs. So the reality is that, and I'm not sure if you get coming from this or not, but most people have a gap. And for Enable Me clients, they range between 1 to 2 million. So a gap doesn't bother us. We just need to know what it is, and then our job is to close it. And there's layers of how we choose to close that gap. The first thing we're looking to do is to maximize your cash surplus, your savings rate. Again, it's the engine room so we can unlock those gains. We don't just want to save, but we want to put that money to use as many times as we can. Then we get an extraordinary return for that little bit of effort that was made initially. So when we work with clients, we want to get them mortgage free as quickly as possible. So let's say 8 to 10 years. We do that by saving more and showing them how to improve their capability. We have systems in place, we have targets, we have plans, we track, we keep our clients accountable. And I might just add that it's not sucking all the fun out of your life. It's kind of not the chicken and broccoli diet that most people may stick to for a week. And in my case, I might stick to for the morning. We need to still have the stuff that brings us joy, or else it's not sustainable. But if we can get you mortgage free in 10 years, as you can see in this particular scenario, they're mortgage free at 55 rather than 65, which means that the money we were saving and putting towards the mortgage, we can now save for retirement. So it makes the graph look a little bit more like this. So between the ages of 55 and 65, we can save. And then we have KiwiSaver getting paid out at 65. And the impact of that is that we should be able to fund your retirement into at least 75. So now instead of a 25-year gap, we have a 15-year one. But before we focus on growing wealth, because it's growing wealth that closes that retirement gap, we spend as much time as possible trying to maximize that surplus, pay off your mortgage as quickly as possible, because that's what unlocks the next door. So we focused on the cash surplus to start with, and we know that you fritter about 15% of your income. Now, fritter means spending on things that don't necessarily make you happier, but they do make you poorer. So that's either because there's a lack of transparency, or it's just unconscious spending, or you simply just have no reason not to. But for something to be a fritter, when you stop spending it, you're no less satisfied. So the idea with money is that the more you spend on something, the happier you're supposed to be. So when you're designing a financial plan, you need to work out the things that makes you happy, and let's make sure they're in there. Again, not that chicken and broccoli thing. Then let's go on the hunt for fritter. The two most common areas that people fritter money are food and their home loan repayments. Food, we tend to spend a little bit more than we think, more frequently than we think. So normally we can get between 20 to 30% improvement for our clients just by being aware and being more detailed in that plan of where that money's going. So if we can save $100, $200 a week on food, that translates to a few $1,000s in savings every year just on food alone. However, when it comes to home loans, when we restructure your mortgage, we can save hundreds of thousands per year by structuring that better. We've spent a lot of time working out how we can repay our home loan the fastest with the least amount of interest to the bank, but having maximum flexibility around that. When we work with our clients, we tend to increase their savings ability by 300%, and we shorten their mortgage by around 2/3 of what they're on track to do themselves. And again, we do this because we're trying to grow wealth, and that's the foundation to growing wealth. So I just want to call out the inefficiencies in the default mortgage structure. And the number 23 is the one I want you to remember. Most of us will have a table mortgage where we're making a fixed monthly payment to the bank every month. And if the interest rate doesn't change over that 30-year period, neither will the amount that you pay the bank per month. But what does change in that payment is the portion of the amount that goes towards paying interest and the amount that goes towards paying principal on the loan. So to start with, you pay a lot of interest and a small amount of principal, and over time that ratio changes, so you pay slightly more principal and less interest until ultimately you've repaid your whole loan. Now, I thought it would be year 15, so halfway through the term, that you would start paying more principal than interest in that monthly repayment, but it's actually not till year 23. So not only are you going to pay the bank 1, 2, or 3 times the amount you borrowed over the 30 years, but you're going to pay the bank first, which is what we need to change. So a few things that we look at when we work out how to structure a mortgage is obviously we want to get you debt free as quickly as possible. So we pay attention to the pace that you can repay your home loan off, not just the interest rate. That becomes less important. But for example, if you have a $600,000 mortgage and it's fixed for 6%, over a 30-year term, you're going to pay just under $700,000 in interest, plus the original $600,000 you borrowed. So if we paid that home loan off in 10 years, however, we would only pay $198,000 in interest. Still a lot, but significantly less than $700,000. So saves us about $495K that we don't have to pay the bank in interest. That point is really important to acknowledge. So now the question becomes, what do we do with that $500,000 and the 20 years that we have without the ball and chain? But the key is you need to maintain flexibility. You need to allow for volatility because stuff happens that we don't plan for. But we also need to be able to unlock your equity. So how can we achieve this? One of the first things we understand when we work with our clients is what's your household income and what's your mortgage level. And we work this out as a ratio. So if your net household income was $100,000, for example, and your mortgage was $400,000, that's a ratio of 1 to 4, and we would expect to get you mortgage free in around 8 years. If that ratio was closer to 1 to 5, we would expect to get you debt free in 10 to 12 years. Now, if your ratio is 1 to 8 or higher, we would likely be telling you to sell your property, and we would be working on another plan for you. But before we get too excited about investing money, we need to understand what a financial BMI is. There's no point in having an investment plan if your behavior doesn't match, because you'll erode that progress that we're making somewhere else. So understand if you're a shopper, a saver, a plotter. What's your cash flow position? Are you sinking, floating, or flying? These things feed into creating the right strategy for you. Where are you frittering money? Most commonly, it'll be food and your home loan, but it also pays to shop around for utilities. There tends to be around 10% of wastage there. And with your non-negotiable costs, there's probably around 10% of slippage that we can sharpen without you feeling that impacted on. So there's layers of savings to be found. And with your mortgage, what are your ratios? Are you on track to have this paid off as fast as possible? And if not, perhaps come in and see us. If you're self-employed or have a side hustle, there could be ways that we can try and maximize that as well. Key thing to remember here is what you're doing now is not an indication of what you are capable of doing, but it is a reflection on what you're likely to achieve unless you address this and improve your capability. So if you were to work with us from a coaching perspective, you would have an initial session with me or one of our other financial coaches or wealth strategists. Our aim is to understand where you are now, what you're trying to achieve, or what you should be trying to achieve in the absence of any goals. We want to work out, based on what you're doing at the moment, the pace that you're on track to achieve that, and if there's an opportunity to improve it. And if we can improve your capability, and we normally can we get your money working harder for you as well? Because an improved capability with a better wealth strategy is where you create hundreds of thousands of dollars of difference over a 10 to 12 to 20 year period. And when we work with clients, it tends to be over a 12-month period. And as part of that, we're thinking about their medium to long-term goals, and we want to help them with some of the heavy lifting if required. So it's important for us to determine where you are on your journey so we can sort of get the specialist teams around you to help you go where you need to go. So as mentioned at the beginning, there's the option for you guys to come in and see us for an initial consultation. And for people watching tonight, we've got a discount on that of $150 plus GST. It's usually $350 plus GST if you book by Friday, the 8th of July. So you can book that on the website above or by scanning that QR code. The other thing I want to mention is that next month on the 3rd of August at BNZ Biz Bites, we have our investment specialist, Nikki Morsink, talking about managed funds. So if you're interested in hearing more about sort of non-property investments, feel free to go along to that. But that's it from me at this point. I'm just going to hand over to Nikki, who I think has been collating some of the questions that we've got through tonight.
Hi, thanks, Ngaire. That was amazing. I tell you what, it's staggering when you see the amount of interest that you pay. Most of us just unconsciously, I don't know, gets paid. We don't think about it much more than that, do we? But when you see it in cold, hard text, it's very sobering.
Yeah, it's unreal. It's unreal.
I know. So I've got a couple of questions here that I wanted to run past you. So for people out there that are busy thinking, gosh, is it better to pay off our mortgage first before we start thinking about investing? Or do we do both? What are your thoughts on that?
So what we like to do is it's really important to get your foundation strong first before you start building your wealth tower. So we don't want to put anything at risk when we start to invest. So my answer to that would be best option generically is to get that mortgage gone as quickly as possible. It's a guaranteed return on the interest rate that you're being charged.
Awesome, thank you. And of course, they can still access their equity, can't they?
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
So it's like a double whammy. And so could you explain, just in case anyone's not sure, what the difference is between principal part of a mortgage payment and the interest part?
Right, okay, yep, so that's what I talked on before around that sort of 23-year rule. So principal is money that you're actually paying off the loan, like the amount that you borrowed. So it's getting rid of your actual lending, reducing that down. Interest is the cost that borrowing that money costs you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. I understand. And then another question is, because there's a lot going on out there in the world at the moment. If people are sort of feeling, because the media goes crazy, doesn't it? The negative headlines, you don't have to look hard to find a negative headline these days. If that's making people feel overwhelmed when they think about this stuff, what would your advice be?
So it depends what moves you're trying to make at this point. So I guess some of the negative headlines we've been hearing is property prices are falling, and we want to know what the impact of that is. And the reality is, are they really? And is it to the extent that we're being told? Unlikely, but the jury's still out on it. But basically, it depends on your situation what that impact is. And if you're, if you don't need to sell, or if you're looking to buy, a falling house price environment's great. And if you've got a property like an investment property or something, the reality, when we're setting people up to buy an investment property, we want to make sure that they can hold that property when the tide comes in and when the tide comes out. So Kiwis tend to have a tendency of buying high and selling low, so getting nervous. But when you're investing either in a property or in the markets, you need to understand the nature of the markets and the fact that fluctuations do happen, and not sort of freak out and panic when prices do go down. We want to make sure that you can hold it through a full cycle to when that investment has achieved what it needs to for you. Otherwise, it ends up being a way for you to lose money rather than gain it.
Correct. Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Ngaire. It's all about cycles, isn't it?
Yeah.
You need to think in 10-year cycles, whether it's property or markets.
Yeah.
I just saw a wee question come in. I'm going. I did laugh. I see the correction to rental. Appreciate it. So this question is it worth leveraging a rental, paying off the mortgage and using the money to acquire more assets rather than paying off the house fully? Oh, I think I might need to go up a bit on that question. Yeah, I just want to make sure I understand that question correctly, which is I think they mean leveraging. Do you mean leveraging the home property to buy a rental? Let's read it as that. Ngaire, sorry, did I make that clear enough?
I'll give it a crack and then feel free to direct me somewhere else. So I guess the reality is that we want to make sure that when you buy that investment property, that it doesn't put your home at risk at all. So we want to understand sort of what that investment property could cost you, and can you weather it with having your home mortgage in tow as well. So for a lot of our clients, we will get them to a point where their mortgage is low. So yeah, gone or like just there a little bit, and then we'll look to purchase another property as well. So it's a bit of a kind of case-by-case basis that the question that I think has been asked here. Yeah. But the reality is that you still can have a home mortgage and purchase an investment property. But we just want to make sure, again, that you can hold that for at least 10 years, because during that time, generally, the tide's gone in and out. So you've experienced what we're experiencing now, which is a downturn, but we don't want you to have to sell. We want you Like, it's important to us that you want to sell when it's right for you, rather than when you feel like the market's dictated that to you.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you. And one last question, Ngaire. So the role of KiwiSaver in this picture.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think with sometimes people are trying to figure out like how much they should contribute to that, you know, like, is it the minimum or more? Do you have a view on that?
I do. So my blanket, and I'm going to assume that you own your home for this answer. So my answer to this would be contribute the minimum unless your employer is matching a higher level. So say if you do 4, your employer will do 4. If you do 5, they'll do 5. You do 8, they'll do 8, that type of thing. Then I'd be like, well, keep going until your employer stops matching you. But otherwise, I would say contribute the minimum amount. So that's generally 3% for any wage earner. Your employer should do 3%, and then you'll get the government contribution as well. The reason being is that KiwiSaver is a government regulated managed fund. So you can't access that money unless you bought your home, which again, I'm assuming you have for that answer. And then you can't access it till you're 65. So for a lot of, like for many of us, that's a long time away. So if you're wanting to invest sort of 8% of your wage, it's probably better to direct 3% to KiwiSaver and then direct 5% to a separate managed fund that you can access if and when you need to. You don't have to wait till that 65 mark or financial hardship.
Perfect, thank you. I'm just going to address a question from Callum. So Callum's basically, actually I'm going to answer this one. So Callum, you're asking, you know, what are the strategies to pay off the mortgage within a shorter period and what are the loan restructure options? That question would more than happy to answer with you in person, but it's really specific to your situation. And as a result, it's probably not appropriate to cover in a call like this. So yeah, that's it with the questions there, Ngaire.
Awesome. Cool. I'm not sure if you're still around, Michelle, but thanks very much for I'm not sure if you want to close off or...
Yeah, look, thanks Ngaire and Nikki. Look, you know, I'm at the other end of my working career nearly, and wish I had some of this advice back when I was at the start of my career. Yeah, certainly really beneficial, and I think it's so important to get out there and educate our well, all our generations. So thanks again for your time, and everybody, it was recorded, so if you've got any questions or would like any more information, and yeah, thanks for the opportunity to book an appointment with you guys at that very generous discounted rate. So I'll pop that on our Facebook page and just, you know, promote that out to the members that are on here tonight, and hope, you know, they take it up. So thanks again, guys. Thanks everybody for joining. Has anybody got any other questions before we close off? No, all very quiet. Okay, all right. No, you're welcome. We'll just wait until everybody shuts off and we can have a bit of a chat. And yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
There we go. We're all done, I think. Just let me
Yeah.
double check. There's only 3 of us on there. There is.
Yeah.
You're still recording?
Let me just stop that, shall I? Where's my record button gone? Stop recording.